Welcome back to another episode of Balance Your Wealth. I'm your host, Ryan, and this week we're diving into the opportunities families often miss as we enter the largest wealth transfer in human history, and how some of the most common mistakes can cause generational wealth to disappear faster than expected. I'm joined today by Sean, Nora, Tyler, and Adam, here to help break down what we're seeing in real time. So let's start off with the most common issue. We just don't see families talking about this enough. And what communication isn't there, the wealth transfer ends up feeling more like a surprise than a plan. Tyler, want to go ahead and get us kicked off with this?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. One thing I think just about older generations in general, they don't like to talk about much of anything that could be uncomfortable, whether it's feelings, whether it's money, anything like that. It's usually kind of off limits. I think us millennials, we are more comfortable talking about this type of stuff, more open, and so I think the younger generation kind of needs to spark that conversation with their parents. And, that's what I think could get these conversations rolling, get things going in the right direction, and get people comfortable with money talks.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people assume what they want will just take place. And so they just think that the family will work out. And normally they don't come to us and talk about estate planning until they've gone through it with their family, their parents. And so they're in their 60s or 70s and they say, wow, it's just happened to my family. I don't want it to happen to my kids. And so now they want to put a plan in place. And what we try to do is get out in front of it when we're talking with our clients, like introduce us to your kids. Let's have your kids in here to talk about this. And oftentimes that's scarier to do. But ultimately you want to make sure your money goes to the people you love in a timely fashion. And you want to make sure you don't cause any rifts between the siblings because your goals weren't intentionally laid out. They weren't clearly articulated. People didn't know who was going to be in charge. They didn't know what the plan was. And so, yeah, you may be gone, but maybe you actually end up doing some hurt to your family because money makes people do crazy things. And if it's not all laid out and people haven't talked about it, it's not communicated, it can lead to bigger issues in the family.
Yeah, and sometimes even when we talk about communication, we talk about the wealth transfer to the next generation, but a lot of the times it could start with your spouse, right? We've had a lot of meetings with clients where one spouse knows everything. They're kind of overarching in terms of the financial part of the family, but it's always good to loop in the spouse as well, whether or not you're interested in finance, you understand it, having the basics and just understanding, as a family or an individual, like what is your why? What's your purpose? What is your goal with your money? That's also a good place to start.
Well, that's a good point, Nora. I mean, finances are a touchy subject for a lot of different people. So diving into that specific numbers in each instance, you don't necessarily need to do that. But if you at least have a structure and a game plan and everybody's aware of that, like that's somewhat of the contrarian argument is like, hey, do I have to divulge everything? Do I have to let them know exactly how much there is? Not necessarily, you don't. But if you're transparent on what the structure is and what the plan is, it at least gives everybody uh, a feeling of, hey, we're all on the same page, we're all going in the same direction. We don't necessarily need to know everything about every last dime, but having an understanding of what people think and the structure of what's planned ahead is important.
What's the old joke about, what happens when you assume? I don't know if I can say it on here, but I think, yeah, everybody needs to get on the same page. No one's a mind reader, right? Everything needs to be laid on the table, especially when it comes to money, estates, homes. Things need to be laid out clearly. So, yeah, communication. We know it's big in every aspect of life, but especially in estate planning and talking money.
And it's not just money, right? A lot of times it's healthcare. We don't want siblings fighting. Should mom and dad go into a home? Should they stay in their personal residence? It's a lot easier for the family to get along when mom and dad have laid out exactly what they want. Hey, we don't want to be a burden on you. Put us in a home, or no matter what, keep us in our home and use all my money to fund that. Don't care if you kids get a nickel. I want to make sure I'm in my home, right? There is no right or wrong answer. It's making sure that you don't cause problems for your family down the road, and you become a burden on them. That you've laid out your instructions. You know exactly what you want, and you've articulated that to the people that you love, to help the family stay together.
Assuming that, we probably mostly work with older generation that's going to be passing on a lot of that, wealth. Do you guys ever work with your clients and their heirs to kind of, hash this out, figure out, hey, who's getting what are the, parents' wishes and all that stuff? Is that anything that ever comes up for you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. It comes up a lot for us, especially I think Sean and I have discovered the last year or so in the agricultural community, the farming community, especially where you may have multiple heirs that want nothing to do with farming, right? They've been around it their whole life and now they've had enough and gone off and done their own careers. Well, that doesn't mean mom and dad, who are probably still farming, don't love them any less just because, they chose not to farm. However, there may be kids that do want to farm. So the mismatch of values between heirs and between next of kin does matter. And to your point of having a plan, at least discussing it is step one. Being transparent about what's out there, whether it's land, whether it's a farm, whether it's multiple farms, and who's going to operate on those is extremely important.
Yeah,
And
it could be as simple as just scheduling a meeting with everybody that's involved so you can hash out those conversations. And we've been a part of those, not really as a mediator, but just to make sure that, the parents, their wishes, their why, what their goal is with this money and what the strategy is clear to the kids as well. And we can kind of help them through that. So it could be as simple as just getting in a room together or Zoom or having a conversation about it. But it just starts with having the conversation, right? And just putting it on the table.
and most of the time when we meet with people, this isn't like a, a 1 hour discussion and then we're on to the next one, right? Because oftentimes the communication has to happen between spouses. Like, what do we want? And so we always tell people, grab a glass of wine, right? There's not going to be a fun conversation. Talk to each other, and it starts for young clients too. Like, who do you want to take care of your kids? Should something happen to both of you? And for older clients, it's, what are your goals? Are they the same? And oftentimes we're so busy in life. We're going through work. We're going through raising kids. We're excited about retirement, and we've just never talked about these things. And so you do have to have an uncomfortable conversation, maybe with your spouse first, to make sure you're aligned. And then we've got to get it documented. And then after we get it documented, then we've got to communicate it to the family. So it's a multi-step process to make sure that, the family is on the same page, and intentions are clearly communicated.
I think with all the tech going on, right? Like things have gone crazy the last 5 or so years. The platforms we use are more tech advanced. You clients see AI everywhere out there. I think that's helping move the conversation forward because when we meet with some of our older clients, we're like, hey, what if we bring, Jack in on this? He can help you get this set up, or, let's create a Gmail, right? Like some clients don't even have an email. And, you reach out to the kids and they're like, I've been trying to have mom or dad get a Gmail for a few years. Like, thank you so much for starting the conversation. So we just see it in small things like that. But I think with tech and the way things are going, that's kind of bringing that conversation to light. Like, hey, we need to make sure stuff is in the right places. We can access it easily. It's not going to get scammed away from you guys or from us. Let's nail down those things.
That's a
Yeah,
great
and
point.
kind of looping in like the kids and things like that to your financial advisor, I think is also a really important part is if something was to happen, even for a spouse, right? Like who do I go to that knows this information or who can point me in the direction of the trustee or where the trust is or where these accounts are? What are the numbers? How do I move to a different account if someone had passed? Just being familiar with who that person or point of contact may be is really important. And putting a face and name is good as well.
Yeah, and it's a great point. We've had some clients that have passed away, and we've gone through the process of, maybe that spouse was the only person that was in charge of finances, and do we have access to their email? Right? Do we know their PIN to their phone? In case we need to reset a password, in case we need to contact that bank, do we have financial power of attorneys in place? Those things are so important to have in one location. And to your point, Nora, like that's where we bring out a lot of value. So that if someone does have a problem, right, they do pass, then they say, hey, just call the folks at Balance Wealth, right? They've got the plan. They know where the documents are. They know how to, give you authority to be able to pay my bills. Should I lose my mental capacity? And when that relationship's established, then everyone is on the same page, and we can make sure things continue on seamlessly.
Yeah, Tyler, I really like the AI and technology aspect that you brought up. Yes, the generational wealth transfer that's going on right now is very real. However, those that are actually transferring it down don't know AI. They don't know the new tech world, nor do they necessarily want it, right? That face-to-face interaction is equally important with that generation. Sitting down across the kitchen table, that's what they want. So to introduce them to new AI, new technology, new methods that are out there that work, maybe reaching the children and the next of kin is the best way to introduce that to them. So more the merrier, having that conversation with the entire family where everybody knows what's going on up front.
And I think you kind of already alluded to it a little bit here, but I think something that goes hand in hand with the communication problem with families and kind of the wealth transfer is what you said, the values mismatch, right? Like, one generation has got an idea of how they want to see this wealth used or how they want to see it, grown or whatever, but that might be completely different than the heirs that are going to inherit all that money. So that can have a big impact along with the communication if you kind of want to touch on that again real quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kind of going back to the farming example where, say a farming family has three different kids and they've got four different farms out there. Well, the math doesn't go well in that next generation of who gets what. And it brings up real problems where how do you divide a farm up? Should we go buy another farm? You know, it, questions like that always arise, and you find out 10 years later that two of the kids don't even want a farm. So the truly the conversation of having what you want to have happen, whether it's the farm or your legacy or generational wealth, having that conversation first and foremost and finding out what the values are of everybody. That does matter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can
Definitely.
I can chime in there just from experience. I have four siblings, and we are all totally different. I don't know if there's one thing we all agree on. So when you get into bigger families, it becomes even more important to lay out and clarify what parents' goals may be and what the next generation does want to do with that estate.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So next up, we're going to talk about, along this idea of communication, values mismatch and all that, instead of just waiting to leave all the money, when the parents all pass away and the kids are, probably in their 60s at that point, the idea of giving while they're still alive. So the next mistake we see families make is assume the will is the plan. The reality is there are two different strategies, giving while living versus leaving it at death. And both have trade-offs that can make or break the family's security long term. So Nora, you want to go ahead and jump in and take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good point I like to bring up in conversations when we're in such a society that you work, 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 and you save, save, save. And the hard part is to, kind of have those conversations, make that decision of what do you want to do, when you hit retirement or throughout your life, and not just plan on what happens when you pass, right? And a couple components to that is one, from a tax standpoint, right? There's different strategies that you want to reduce, your inheritance, just from a tax standpoint, for those that will be receiving that wealth transfer. And the other part is your goal, is your why to, if you have a family, is it to enjoy those funds? And a good kind of exercise I like to kind of just put so someone can kind of visualize is if you wait till you die, and let's say you amass your wealth to a certain amount, do you want your kids to enjoy that before they amass their own wealth at 60, right? And should have their own funds? Do you want to leave it to grandkids so they can enjoy their life? So one things that we like to do as financial advisors is help from that tax standpoint, but also really help you decide what makes sense in terms of which count to pull from, or how to give that to your kids, and how much, because every year there's a tax exclusion, a gift tax exclusion. We can help with those things, but if your goal is to enjoy your money, for your family to enjoy it, go on trips, help pay for education during the year, just help your children or those you want to receive that money actually enjoy their life and help their life before when you pass. And all of a sudden now it's okay, what do we do with all these funds when we've already amassed our own wealth?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Nora. I mean, this baby boomer generation that is, going through retirement and getting to retirement, they're really the first generation that's going to pass down this kind of wealth. 401ks and IRAs didn't start till the 70s. So now people are having this ability. And if they wait till they're 80 or 90 to pass down the wealth, then maybe it goes to their children that are in their 60s and they're like, I don't need your money, mom and dad. Like I have my own. But I could have used it when I was 30 and 40 trying to buy a house. I could have used it when I was trying to create memories for my family. And all that really starts with a plan, right? We've got to have a good plan in place to make sure that we don't achieve your greatest fear, and that is run out of money. So once we know how much you're spending, how much you could potentially leave behind, maybe you can make the decision, hey, I'd like to go ahead and help my kids with that down payment of a house, or my grandchild with their car, and not have that burden fall onto my kids. You get to be able to make those decisions when you feel confident in your financial plan, and then put together the right tax strategy to make sure you get that money to the people you love in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I think this conversation is super timely. I mean, costs for things have gone crazy. The younger generation feels strapped for cash. I mean, Sean, you brought up homes, right? Homes are crazy expensive. Interest rates are high. Those monthly payments are high. Education has gone crazy the last 5 or 10 years. People, my age and younger aren't having kids, or aren't having them, near as early as they used to. There's a lot the silver tsunami generation could help with right now in this day and age. And so, yeah, I think, I'm a big proponent of, give while you're living. When it comes to my kids, I would love to see them enjoy it and use it during their lifetime. I want to be able to see that. I want to see my money put to good work. Who knows what I'll see when I'm passed away? Who knows if I'll be watching down or up or wherever, so, I want to see good things happen for the hard work that I've done or that people have done over the years.
Awesome, great points, guys. I think it's really obvious that there can be a lot of value in figuring out how to intentionally give some money while you're still alive versus leaving it all after you're already gone. So something to chew on there for everybody. So the final mistake we're going to go into is assuming the trustee decision is obvious. Choosing who controls money after you're gone can either protect relationships or blow them up. And I'm sure we've all heard the horror stories that can go along with this. So Sean, you want to go ahead and talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I always talk about with clients is, do you know who's going to be in charge? And have you documented that? And oftentimes people say, yeah, I've got a will. And I always remind them, a will is a set of instructions to a judge. So a will is a really bad way to do estate planning because it guarantees the court gets involved. If all I've done is set up a will, then my kids are going to have to go to court, which is going to be delayed through the probate process. Bills are going to be accumulating. I need a judge to then say, hey, I agree with your will. Let's go ahead and make this person in charge. And so oftentimes we assume that the family knows who that person is going to be, and that can cause fighting. And so if we have a proper estate plan, not just a will, we've gone through all of our assets, we've titled them correctly, so we have a beneficiary on them, we've built out a trust, we can lay out exactly who that trustee is, and then we can communicate that to the family so that, again, there is not fighting. And if we title our beneficiaries correctly, if we develop a trust and we fund that trust by updating the beneficiary, now we can avoid probate court for my family. I don't need a judge to tell me who's going to be in charge because I've, accurately told the entire family, I've documented it, and that can go outside of probate, have my wealth, all of my assets go to the people I love as quickly as possible without making a public record, without going through the court process system. And that is when we have a proper estate plan. So by just doing a will, by just assuming everyone knows who that person is going to be, is going to end up leading to problems in the family. So let's put together a solid estate plan. Let's fund trust. Let's make sure we've got beneficiaries on all of our accounts. And let's make sure we've communicated with the family so that we can, provide as much peace to the people we love after we pass.
Yeah, one thing that I see pop up in estate planning is, people create a trust, they think everything's great. They have, let's say, 3 kids, and they want all 3 kids to be co-trustees. And that can cause its own set of headaches. Whereas if you picked one trustee, they are legally bound to do what your trust says and follow through. Whereas now, if you have 3 co-trustees, things need all 3 signatures. They all need to agree before they sign something. You almost create just as many headaches. So, I'm a big proponent of having, one trustee and then obviously successor trustees listed in there. But that's always a conversation that kind of pops up is, well, I thought, everybody would be just a co-trustee. And, that causes some problems as well.
I mean, it really could be anybody, right? We almost always default to kids, right? Or the oldest one because maybe we think they're the, best decision makers, but that may not be your situation. It doesn't necessarily have to be the children. It could be a friend. It could be someone outside, but then also try to consider what that fee may be to have them with, making your wishes and going through the trust and making sure all those things are done. But I think the most important part to think about, no matter who it is or who you designate, is do they understand what your wishes are, what your goals are for that money, and that you can trust them. So doesn't necessarily have to default to a particular family member, but just make sure that their values align or they at least understand what your values are.
That's a good point, Nora. And that's the second time you brought up the key word, which is goals, right? If we're all doing our advisory fiduciary duty properly, everything we do is based on our client's goals. And so if everybody knows what those are, then it's an easier step in the process. So step one is identifying what those goals are into the estate planning. And if that marries up their goals, then hey, we've done our job.
Awesome. Great conversation, everyone. I think you really shed some light on how, just basic communication, making sure you're aligned on what values are, possibly giving some of your wealth away during your lifetime. And last, just making sure you choose the right person to see your goals to, Nora's point, fulfilled, can really help tie all this together to make sure that your wealth transfers, meaningfully and how you want it to. With that said, we're going to go ahead and say Adam is the winner of this week, and he's going to kick it off with his, 30 to 60-second rant. I'm sure he's got some stuff in his brain he's ready to rant about.
No, thanks, Ryan. Hey, we're coming off of spring. Springtime is a great time for sports. You've got the Masters, you've got March Madness, you've got baseball starting with the new silly ABS rule system, but we're a bunch of football guys, so I'm going to talk a little football here, kind of going back to college football, because Sean, you and I played college football, and the status of college football now with NIL is just crazy. I'm glad players are getting paid. I'm glad that's happening now, but I wish there was a rule that said, hey, you only get one transfer, right? You only get one transfer, and to tie it all back into gift giving and estate planning, part of giving is not just necessarily to your family, but it's to charities and schools and whatever else. So I would love for a college football player to go into college in today's date and finish all 4 years or 5 years at the same institution. If you need to go to somewhere, you get one shot to do it. But 20 years later, you should be giving a alumni check to 4 different schools because you played for all 4 of them. That's just my opinion.
Nice. Yeah. That NIL stuff gets crazy with the transferring. So, like you said, good they're getting paid, but definitely hard to keep track of what's going on nowadays. So thanks for joining us for another week of Balance Your Wealth. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.